Welcome to Qore Conversations, where we discuss innovation and technology advancements and how they're shaping the automotive industry. In this episode, we're going to be discussing identity verification and data in the automotive retail environment. And joining the conversation, almost as always, Todd Smith, founder and CEO at QoreAI, and Brian Epro, Alliance Manager at Equifax. Nice to see you guys. How are you?
Doing great.
Doing awesome.
Awesome. Todd, hey, I want to get into these questions. I know the audience is loving this content. So before we do that, though, I'd like to get a little brief overview, just, a little bit of a brief overview on QoreAI, and maybe throw over to Brian too, a little bit of Equifax, just to set the standard for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. So Qore, our premise was really to build the dealership's first OS. We think there's so much disconnected technology inside the dealership, and we thought it was a good time to kind of start fresh with our plan. And our immediate focus has been around identity verification, credit, documents, but that's also really helped us understand a deeper level of data, a deeper level of communication, and ultimately how to build a platform that will play nice with others in the marketplace. So they're kind of our core principles. And we're excited. As a startup, you always have challenges, but we've been having a blast building it out.
Nice. Brian, tell us a little bit about Equifax and your role over there.
Got it. Well, you may have heard of this little company called Equifax that I work for, right? So, the big misconception out there is that Equifax is a credit bureau and that's it, right? And that was even my misconception. I've been here about 4 years now. I'm on the automotive partnership team. So I work with different vendors and providers to dealers in the industry. The biggest surprise for me when I finally agreed to come on board is that it's a lot more than just credit. And what I would say is that kind of the company's North Star is personalization. So it's using credit data for personalization. It's using identity data for personalization. It's using traditional marketing data that you're used to considering as an auto dealer for personalization. But we take that data to the next level, where we actually layer in some directly measured income and economic measures inside of those marketing measures, so that and make those very easy for companies like as a for instance QoreAI to make available for their dealers to use.
I love it. I especially love it when we're using more of this data in a useful manner for dealers versus just confusing them with it. There's been so much of that over the last probably 15 years. So it gets me excited to hear you guys talk about these things, because it seems to bring a lot more clarity to the puzzle pieces as they begin to show image a lot more clearly. So, well, hey, I want to jump in first, and this is probably for you, Todd, but maybe provide a little explanation on how QoreAI's identity verification process works, and maybe even an additional why it's so crucial for today's environment.
Yeah, so look, we really started with identity first for two specific reasons. The first reason is just the rise of fraud in the industry. This year, somewhere right about $7.98 billion of fraud will hit automotive. Now, that's up and down a whole stack of income misrepresentation, identity fraud, lender fraud, straw purchases. Like, you have a whole host of activities, right, that are driving fraud inside the industry. But if we break down specifically to identity fraud, as well as synthetic fraud, that's about 2.3 billion of that. So we really felt that was an important issue to solve. So, and you break that down, think about that as like 5% of automotive transactions are fraudulent or so this year. I mean, it's mind blowing to think that. So we wanted to solve it. We knew we couldn't just solve it with driver's license, because even our government's moving away from a driver's license only world. You've seen, if you've flown in the last, 6 months, you'll see this thing called Real ID. The government's moving towards all government facilities, IRS, everything, Social Security, all as well as TSA, moving to this Real ID. Real ID is like, we don't believe in your driver's license alone anymore, so we need another way to ID you. And looking at auto's kind of stuck in a position of neutral, where they're just doing driver's license scanning at most, when we realized, okay, that would not be enough. So we looked around And we first started with looking at the browser that the customer is accessing on, if they're remote. If they're at the dealership, you don't have that. But if they're remote, we were able to start IDing the browser to know, are they coming from a fraudulent IP? Are they saying in a conversation they're in Ohio, yet it's resolving to China, Eastern Europe, Africa, somewhere else? So our first part was to fingerprint the browser. And then this is why Equifax came into play. We found an opportunity to partner to do device verification. So we said the phone in the customer's hand is probably one of the most accurate ways to ID somebody. And you can quickly determine, hey, that's a burner phone, recently activated SIM card in their phone. Like, there's so much data and intelligence around the phone because we use these devices all day. So with our partnership with Equifax, we hit through Equifax, the carriers return to us customers' full name, legal name, address, verified the phone number, obviously, at that point. And we let the customer update the email address only because we found many people have multiple email addresses. And, knowing that we've returned the right email address out of, I think, average consumer in America has 4, it's probably pretty hard. So we just let the customer put that in. Then we do driver's license, and then we do what we consider the basics of our industry, synthetic ID, as well as red flag and OFAC. And we run some additional government agency data in the back to also match it against the driver's license address and the address returned through Equifax. So we're doing kind of a very multi-point process of verification. And our number one goal is stop fraud right up front. But stopping fraud then also led us, I think, in a vision that was like, wow, once I ID a customer to that level, we can unlock a huge amount of additional data. And that's probably one of the most exciting things right now for Qore, was the ability to look past, okay, I've ID'd them. What else can I learn about them? Are they going to buy? What are they going to buy? What can they afford? There's so much valuable data that's out there that we can leverage to help dealers kind of push their business to the next level.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. The partnership, obviously, with Equifax. I remember it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, an Equifax report where it was, I think at that time, it's like they were reporting 30%, might have been more than that, consumers that misreport or leave out really critical financial details during their loan processing. And there's a lot of fascinating points of data like that with what you're doing is, I think, critically important for dealers. And the billions that rack up every single year, what dealer wouldn't want to be getting some of those cost and profitability efficiencies back while also improving in this particular area? I think there's a lot of win-wins here. But before I move on from that, Brian, I did want to also get any thoughts from you regarding the partnership between Equifax and CoreAI, just see if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, and they're all good. Don't worry. Don't worry.
I figured you would.
Yeah. What I get a kick out of is when I got to Equifax, we had a capability where we could go into the phone, basically, consumer consent to go in the phone and grab their contact information and put that into the dealer's database, right? And that was always thought of at Equifax as a fraud product. And it is still sold as a fraud product, right? To Todd's point. There's this awesome side effect of it, though, which is that as a result of doing it this way, you're getting very clean, correct data being put into your database in the first place. And the biggest problem a lot of dealers have when they're trying to enhance their data sets and to append data to them is that the data itself is dirty, and you can't fix dirty data, right? You can't append good data to bad data. It just simply doesn't work. So for instance, our data sets require a name and an address for the types of data that Todd is using, that CoreAI is using, right? If you don't have the name and address, you can't have the data. We're not going to key off of a phone number or a email because they're too amorphous, right? They change, they come and they go. People have multiples, so you have to be able to prove the person is that person. So long story short, by having this process Todd's put in place for dealers is right up front, rather than having to deal with dirty data down the line, he's getting crystal clean data right at the beginning. And that is the core, no pun intended, of what the benefit is that he's bringing to the table. So it's authenticated and it's correct in the first place.
Nicely done, Brian.
It's funny.
I use the word
Yeah,
core. So.
it's core on core. It's funny. I told my wife this. I was like, it's like once we did this identity thing, I was like, I felt like Percy Spencer. You know who Percy Spencer is?
No,
Percy
Todd,
Spencer. Come on, let's go, guys. So Percy Spencer was the guy working on microwaves, and he had a candy bar in his shirt, and he got too close to it, and it melted it. And he's the guy who basically invented the microwave.
Yep.
And I found like, wow, like this side effect of, as Brian so put well, that we're IDing the customer with really good data up front to push into the CRM or any other system for the dealer. It unlocked this whole other magical side of the business of what we are now able to do. And then it just magnifies when you start running these models using actual AI. I'll use the word, I hope, in the correct way today, to be able to deliver something beyond decision tree or trying to just create the most basic models that almost every system in the past is continuing to use. So,
yeah. Todd, you've mentioned this before, something that I believe you call the deterministic scoring system from like 1 to 1,000. Would you be willing to elaborate a little bit on what that means, how that's calculated? I think the audience would be really interested in hearing a little more on that.
Yes, I think through time, what is the dream of every dealer, right? You want to be able to look into your existing customers. You want to be able to look into your inbound leads. You want to look into your old leads that you spent $15 or $20 for 3, 4, 5 years ago. And, now they're just toast, right? You're not doing anything. Maybe you're just sending lobbing. I call it the email bomb to them once a month that they're ignoring. But if you could look back into time and look even at the new inbounds and know which ones are in market, how valuable is that? And I think with our partnership with Equifax, they have thousands of attributes, and understanding those attributes enables us to start looking and determining, is this customer truly in market? Are they looking to buy like now? Are they still kind of like mid, or maybe they're upper funnel? Because I think by even understanding that at the most basic level, it changes your approach to that consumer. The consumer who's at the 5-yard line, it's, do I have the right car and why buy from me, right? But if they're high funnel, that consumer may be, hey, let me just help you find the right car. So I'm going to ask you a whole different set of needs analysis questions. And if you're a mid funnel, it may be a combination of, hey, choose us. Here's our Google reviews. Here's stuff about us. Here's why you should do business with us. And here's all the benefits of us organizationally, and inventory that matches most likely what you're going to buy, right? So I think for us, it was learning to use data. And I think this will be a continuous journey. I don't think it's a stopping start. I think we're going to use all this attributing data to continually try to understand the consumer's journey and to highlight it back to the dealer to say, hey, these people in your existing database, whatever, these 500 to 1,500 people this quarter are right now, they're showing all the signals that they're going to buy a car. And those signals are not the same. One house, has a new baby, they're going to need a new car. Someone bought a new house. Someone else crashed their car. Someone else lease is about to be done. We have a multitude of potential scenarios. But when you start connecting them all together, it gives you a really deep understanding of consumer behavior. And I think for us, it's unlocking that finally for dealers and helping a dealer now see his data in a new light that he just didn't have before.
It seems like that would be a really effective system for sales managers and salespeople when they're wanting to find some better way of prioritizing customers as well.
Yeah, and look, I think lead prioritization has been around a long time. Um, I think the signaling was more basic at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it was probably more probabilistic. So you would build like a model and then you would hope that the customer aligned to the model. Now we're moving towards more deterministic data. Sorry, I can get that out of my mouth on Friday, where now predictively the consumer is going to do this, right? Because once you track so many scenarios over a course of time, you find those behavioral patterns. And AI is the best at pattern matching. It literally thrives in that environment. So for us, this piece is only going to get better, more accurate, and it's going to help us close the gap of, oh, customers in market, where in market? Oh, they're in this part of the market. So this is what you do here to get them to the next step. And I think this is the power of AI, being able to deliver this well, what I consider the linear customer journey can't. When you're like, day 1, do this, day 7, send that, day 12, text, day 14, call. And that only doesn't work. This is why every CRM or map system, marketing automation, they have thousands of uncompleted task operations, because the salespeople are like, I talked to Brian a week ago. He's not buying till next month. Or Sean, he's waiting till he get his tax return. Yet this thing has 15 different follow-ups to Sean between now and when, tax return season is possible. So I think we're just entering such an exciting time to be able to use data in new ways that will have, I believe, an absolute profound effect on dealer operations.
Can I jump in on one thing?
Please do.
Yeah. I always like to break this down to as simple as, to as simple a level as possible, right? So when we talk about lead prioritization, right, what we don't want to hear is, and we never want to give somebody the impression of, is that we're saying, hey, work these leads, don't work these leads, right? It's saying that if you use lead prioritization the right way, you have 10 leads in front of you, the 3 to call right now, the 4 that are going to need a different kind of customer journey path that Todd is talking about, where AI can figure out that pattern and automatically do that once it has enough data. So it's not. Sometimes you get people who get nervous when you say the lead prioritization, which is, I'm going to go after this lead and then my salespeople are going to touch these other 7 people. That's absolutely not what you want to do. You want to match your engagement to where they are in their buying journey. That's what prioritization allows you to do.
Yeah, it's like, to me, it's like velocity, right? Like if you get 100 leads in today, you're going to attack them all at the same vigor, right? Tomorrow you get 100 leads. Well, what about the leads from yesterday? You can't attack 200 leads with the same vigor and get through all of them. And then day 3, now you have 300 leads that are all really new. How do you contact at that level? You have to triage, you have to prioritize, and you have to build systems that still contact all 300, but with the right personalized messaging. And I think this is what's going to be unlocked versus the one size fits all coming out of a CRM or equity management tool or marketing automation platform. I think we're just going to see a much more precise, personalized world, because that's why AI and the ability to leverage data in new ways is possible, where before you just couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think this takes us into where we probably all wanted to go 10 or more years ago in terms of how we leverage data. And I'm not a fan of the word disruption. There's a lot of words I don't like. That's one it's just silly. It's nonsense. But I do like recalibrate or calibrate. And I think that a lot of what you guys are sharing is evidence of where we're going, where there's this recalibration. And I think it's really important because we're talking about leveraging data and more of it than we've ever been able to even understand up to this point. Whether it's McKinsey or NADA or multiple sources, all report that a vast majority of dealers collect data, but a very small minority of them effectively use it. And that's not a dig against dealers. They need help. They've literally been buried in layers of technology lasagna for a couple of decades now. And now we're finally getting to a point where there's this it's a breakthrough. It's a recalibration with taking some of what we've had and some of what we now have as new capabilities to go to this place. So it's really exciting. But people don't tune into this to listen to my perspective. I want to ask you guys around that leveraging data point. Once a customer's identity is verified, you gain access to all this additional data. Would love to know either or both of your thoughts on how this additional, basically more about that type of information that you can access. I think dealers would be interested in some of that.
Brian, go ahead.
So yeah, in the context of QoreAI and what they're enabling for dealers now, listen, there's a bunch of different types of data that you're able to access, right? First of all, just confirmation of who you are. Are you actually who you say you are? That's the key, most important piece right there, right? Is the information you gave me correct? Yes or no? Yes. Cool. Okay. So now the next question I'm going to ask myself, or if I'm face to face with you, are you in market? What are you in market for? We have data that we're working with QoreAI, that QoreAI is using, that we literally have a model that looks at the previous 90 days of vehicle sales, sees what the attributes are of the people who bought those vehicles, because we can see the sales, right? And then applies about over 1,000 attributes to people for the next 90 days. And those people who match that get a higher score. That's part of the propensity score we were just talking about. So let's say if you're a 990, boy, go talk to this person. Go talk to this person in person, shake his hand, and put him in a car because he's about to buy a car, right? But then the next question becomes, what are you here to look at, and what should we actually try to sell you, right? So you're kicking tires on one thing, but I have some insight now into what you're actually able to afford, what your household is actually able to afford, and I'm able to guide you now. So I'm not going to walk up to you and say, yeah, you can or can't afford that. But what I can do is walk up to you and say, yeah, we'll take a look at this Tahoe, but I'm going to show you a couple different trim levels of it because I know the payment you're going to want to land on is probably a little bit less than where this one is going to land. So I'm able to have a much more intelligent one-on-one conversation with you as a result of the data that QoreAI is providing. But what gets really interesting is as you use this longer term, what Qore will enable is that the dealer's database, it'll almost become predictive. And what I mean by that is this guy, Sean Rains, shows up and he submits a lead, and Qore bumps against what we call an economic cohort and says, oh, Sean's a J38. J38s right now for this dealership are frequently buying an F-150, right? So we're gonna, he's looking at an EV right now, but we're also going to make sure he sees a couple F-150s because these guys are 3 times more likely to end up in a pickup truck than they are in a Mach-E, is the idea.
Yeah, and I think it's, if you really build on that in the thinking that every dealership is unique and every dealership is a microcosm. And though you have big data surrounding all of this, every dealership's individual consumer interactions and data tells its story. And we've come from an industry where CRM is one size fits all. Every dealership has the same basic CRM, and every dealership kind of uses the same follow-up tools and cadence schedules, etc. Right?
Yeah.
I call it like if we surveyed 500 stores, their follow-ups might be slightly different, but even what they're sending is almost virtually the same. I call it like everyone's copied each other, and everyone now looks vanilla and the same. With this data, every dealership actually builds their own personalized kind of cohort ecosystem and marketing plan that grows with them. And I think this is like what I consider divergence off of where tech is today into this new level of technology that dealers can leverage to what I call like a system of intelligence that is working with that individual dealership on its individualness and its customers, which are also unique to that store, and all the data is being worked inside that. Now, yes, you're going to have still big data as an umbrella overflow all of this. But to me, each individual store, and they could be next to each other, but the Ford store operates far different than the Nissan store. The data shows it. So I think we're just, and this is now because of technology where we're in with cloud or in serverless technology and AI and just machine learning, we're able to now do things that just, no one had the processing power to do things like this before. And that to me, gosh, it's worth waking up every day because I get excited because this changes our business. Because if you look at us on a graph, the cost to sell a car in the US has just gone up to the right. And average dealer says it's like 200. NADA says it's like 750, right? Because I think dealers maybe don't even account for all the costs that are wrapped into selling that particular vehicle. And I don't know how NADA gets to theirs, but when I look at that, systems like we're talking about right now, the system of intelligence will drive cost out of that operationally. Absolutely, because it'll allow you to high-speed target the right ones faster, and it allows you to keep the ones that are on the fence in the process, and it allows you to slow roast the ones that are, man, they're still really high up tire kicking. So it allows you to optimize time, like your people's time, your spend in marketing channels, whether social channels, whether direct mail, whether like whatever it's OCTT, like TV, because cable's dead, right? Everybody said cable's dead. Now it's all these direct source TV shows, right? So I think we're at a really interesting inflection point. And, again, a lot can be done now where even I would say 18 months, 24 months, you couldn't do some of this.
I like what you're doing with Qore and just overall, right? Like, it's such a cliche, but and I hate when I use this as an example, but Amazon, right? Amazon is the company that if a average dealer could just do 5% of what you see on an Amazon page and process wise, they would be light years ahead of where they are. And what you're just saying is Jeff Bezos, when he first started up, he said, listen, if we have 450,000 customers, we want to have 450,000 stores. And that's exactly what the situation should be at the dealership. My buying journey is different from Todd's. So treat me differently, engage with me differently, show me different things. And that's what now something like CoreAI has the processing power to ingest massive amounts of data and make usable. That's the difference.
Yeah,
it's a different
as you guys
world.
have, and as you guys have mentioned, affordability is a bigger factor today than it has been in years. The average cost of a car and the average cost of a home, like across the spectrum, all the major industries, everything's jacked through the atmosphere. And when you think about leveraging data around affordability, but also Brian, you had mentioned it, there are so many data points that also indicate, well, categorically, you can even back people into, hey, the majority of people within all of these points of data also end up buying one of these or these. Being able to capture affordability information and helping steer the customer is massively valuable now, more so than probably ever in the industry. And as we're kind of on this topic of data relative to affordability, curious, just maybe top level thoughts from either of you is, why is that understanding a customer's affordability so important in the car buying process?
Man, this was the light bulb moment when I joined Equifax. So I'm taking Todd's thunder for a second there, right? And when they showed me the marketing data set, this IXI data set, right? When you think about all the data, I've got 25 years of industry experience working with data. Okay, behavioral data, product data, really cutting edge stuff. What you always see is that a lot of the data that's out there is awful, right? It's directional and it's just not correct, right? If I get your demographics wrong, and there's risk associated with bad data, right? So there's low risk on demographics. I'm marketing a car to you that's for older people, but you're not going to hate my guts for doing that, right? Maybe I'll just move on, or maybe I'll look at it, right? Get your psychographics wrong. I have the wrong sports team on the ad. Maybe I'll move on, but I'm still not going to you start getting into behavioral data and the risk gets high, where if Todd is acting like he's going to buy a car and you don't know about it and you don't respond to that, you can't sell him a car. But the last level of data that the key and most important is affordability. And the reason why is I can get every single thing right. I can walk you into the finance manager's office, we're going to sign, and you realize I can't afford this car. The whole deal is dead. You have spent all this money and time and effort on somebody who can't afford the vehicle, right? So what we do is we take an affordability out view, and that aligns with what Todd is doing, where the first thing we look at is here's people's ability to here's their total household income, which is directly reported. It's not survey data. There's not human beings telling us this. This is coming straight from banks. And we apply against that also, what are their fixed costs, like their mortgage payments, their current car payments, things like that. And we say, something, if a lot of the companies I work with, they take, and you keep this stuff very simple. If I know your income is 120K a year, what I will do is take an auto payment that's 10% of your monthly income, right? And that we're going to target you that way. And we have customers now who just doing that. We have partners doing that now who are seeing like a 3x increase in conversions on the outreach that they're doing based on, I'm going to show you vehicles that I know are within the income capability that you have, that you can actually afford.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I look at affordability. I mean, coming from retail, listen, I screwed up enough and pissed off my finance manager by dropping a customer into my F&I department that could not afford that payment. And that sets up a lot of like bad experience for the consumer, waste time for the dealership, and that consumer is just going to go down to the other store and go buy the car they could afford, because they're going to save face, and they're not going to do that with you, right? So I think aligning on affordability, this is why, I think everyone's pushing so much to have like an accurate vehicle payment calculator, right, on the website, because that's what customers use, because they're trying to figure that out. That's why it's so powerful on Zillow, right? I need to know, can I afford this? And what does it really look like? And to me, if we can match and understand the customer's affordability beforehand, and then only show him the right vehicles that align with his cohort, right, align with his segment, what he falls in, that meets the payment structure that they can actually afford, the propensity to buy goes through the roof. Absolutely. The match rate goes through the roof, and customers are like, yeah, that's my range right there. Oh, I didn't know I could get that much car, or that new of a car, or, oh, I can get an actual brand new car. I just can't get the top of the line, LTZ Suburban. I'm getting knocked into an LT1, right, at this payment. And I think when you automatically match that, you take it out of the hands of salespeople, which is good. And I'm going to tell you why, because I believe since the pandemic, not as much sales training and maybe people will flame me for this, but not as much sales training has gone into our industry, because it has been much more order taking, where, hey, product was far less than demand. So I didn't have to negotiate for things. I didn't have to be a real, like, quote unquote salesperson. I was more taking orders, right? And I don't believe everybody has resharpened their skills to do a really good needs analysis on a customer, to be able to ask them all the right questions to put them in the right vehicle up front. And I think with what we're doing with data first, it's automatically doing it. It's allowing them to skip that step and saying, hey, sales guy or salesperson, here's like a couple cars you should show them. I don't even need to tell the salesperson why to show them those cars. I don't say that's all they could afford. We can just do it automatically. We have the dealer's inventory. We know what bucket they live in, what vehicles they should be looking at, and what they can afford. That just pops up in front of the salesperson. Now, sales manager, yeah, they need more context, right? I want to know this guy is going to buy, his propensity to buy is high. He's going to be landed on one of these cars, and here's his affordability structure, right? And then more data, right? But I think this is an interesting time again, where our industry is now caught up. We have rising inventory. We have price compression around used cars. Dealers have to relearn to sell and retrain people. That takes a lot of time. Or we can leap ahead now with data and put them in a better driving seat and deliver a better consumer experience. And to me, that again, this is the world we're heading towards. It will all be driven by this. And this also allows dealers to have the current sales structure and sales experience and still yet perform at a higher level.
To add one more thing, to just add a little bit of color, I apologize, Sean.
Yeah. No, keep going. This the great points. You guys are sharing a lot of great stuff.
Well, my stuff's pretty good. Don't know what. No,
I love it.
What I want to make sure that we underscore for anybody who's watching this or listening to this, right, is what we're not saying is somebody submits a lead or walks in and says, I want to look at this car. And you say, well, you can't afford that. I'll walk you to something else, right? What it is, okay, well, let's take a look at this car. And hey, maybe they're looking at an LT1 on that Suburban, and actually they can afford an LTZ. Their payment would allow them to step up into an LTZ. It goes both ways, right? It's not just showing something less expensive. It's showing them what they can afford. And if they want to spend less, fine, let them do it. But here's what you asked to see, and here's a couple other ones I want to show you just so you see what's available for you. And let them make the decision on how they want to proceed.
Right.
That's a great point. And among all of the great points that you both have shared here in the last couple of minutes, a couple of things that stood out to me as I was listening. All of us in the industry know that consumers for a long time have been overestimating their ability to afford certain vehicles. It just happens. Well, in what you're sharing, you can steer people, even just what you were just sharing, Brian. That steering of somebody is to, if they want to make the decision on they buy something that they can easily afford, or illuminating or showing them that they're able to actually afford at a higher level if they want to. That is extremely important, and having that in a verifiable, all of this data, so that also sets up a better experience for the consumer. Some of what you were sharing there, Todd, that there are a lot of people that end up, I don't know, maybe it's 25% of deals end up falling apart, or they get denied financing because people have these unrealistic budget expectations. And you guys are sharing all these points that just kind of speak to both of those things. Being able to steer the consumer, which is ultimately, we all talk about customer experience all the time. This also helps set you up to provide a much better experience for the consumer, and avoiding some of the things that are usually the most explosive when they finally go off in the dealership. Like, what? You've led me all this way and then it falls apart. Some interesting things there. Before we get outside of this part of the topic and of the conversation, I'm curious to know from either or both of you, how is this approach like different from the traditional methods of assessing the customer's buying power? Like, maybe contrast it to the opposite.
Look, the initial glance of that is, let's look at an average retail dealer today, right? Lead comes into the CRM. The first thing they'll do, they'll call, they'll email, they'll text, right? Try to get a hold of them. And they're going to get a hold of them. And most likely, only thing they're going to do is try to get them in. It's appointment setting. We still operate that we're only measured by physical output, meaning how many calls did you do, dials, text messages sent, emails, and appointments scheduled, right? Customer now comes in, and they're coming in on let's say the lead was a Toyota Tacoma. They come in, salesperson's mind is one place. Show them the Tacoma. That's all. That's why they're here. And a lot of times we bypass what drew you to the Tacoma. Why do you like it? What are you going to use it for? Do you have a family? Are they ever going to use it? Like, do you drive on highway? Do you drive in city? Like, we stopped understanding our customers. Now, I will say, best salespeople on the planet still do this like clockwork. But the majority of salespeople just focus on only what the customer has told them. That's their limited perspective. And I look at that and I say, well, using data, we can change that. We can understand the customer behaviorally and help the salesperson bridge that gap without a very lengthy conversation. Now, I still think you ask customers questions because it allows you to build rapport. But the other side, if I have data fueling those questions, they can be far more valuable. They can get me to where I need to go with that customer faster. And ultimately, as you just said, Sean, deliver a better experience for that customer. And I look at our business today, and we're still kind of caught in this like analog processes, right? And we're trying to throw technology at it, but in a wrong way. And I think we're trying to apply old world technology to modern stuff, and it's just like a clunky disconnect. And this is where I always zoom back conceptually that let's start like, we'll go the Elon Musk thinking of first principles and rip it all the way down to pure fact. And fact is only you have a lead and a customer has an interest, doesn't say they're going to buy a car. How do I use data to understand that in total 360 view? How do I put the right information in front of my salesperson to empower that customer on a journey that is personalized and unique for them? And that's far different than the processes we see today in any store. But
That's a great segue because I want to take you guys a little bit into personalized vehicle recommendations.
Brian
Capgemini
loves them.
actually.
It's like his favorite thing in the world.
There's a study from Capgemini that states that personalized marketing increases conversion rates by about 20%. And I know a lot of people talk about personalization in marketing and automotive, and I think there's a few different interesting conversations relative to it. But you guys have even mentioned on this a little bit using cohort data. So question here is using cohort data to determine top three types of vehicles that a customer could be interested in. Could you explain that process, maybe how that works, break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll dive in on this one. So, it's funny. You talk about personalization, and all of us for the past 25 years, 30 years, every company out there is claiming that we've got personalization. We'll do one-to-one marketing. And then you get the automated emails from them that say, "Dear," open bracket, close bracket, because they forgot to put the name in. And it used to be like, that was state of the art, right? Having your name on the email being sent out to you, right? And what we're saying is the email that's being sent out to you shouldn't just say, "Dear Brian." It should say, "Dear Brian, here are the cars we know you're going to be most interested in," right? And here's why we know you're going to be most interested in them. So listen, this just becomes at some point you become kind of a black belt in using data, and systems like CoreAI make that happen automatically. And what I mean by that is, we mentioned the economic cohorts. So that's the unimaginative name we at Equifax have given our affordability cohorts, right? So we have 71 segments. And what it is, though, is the first thing it looks at is your affordability level, right? And meaning your income. So what's the income of somebody in this segment? But then it layers in all the marketing kind of, I call it gobbledygook, but it's valid, right? Which is, hey, how likely are they to be married? How likely are they to have children? Do they go skiing? Do they like to be first on the block with the new thing, or are they laggards? Right? All the marketing stuff we've all been raised on. But the first thing it does is it looks at your affordability. So let's just say now leads are coming in. And actually, let me take one step back. The other thing that happens then is that the entire database can be appended with what that economic cohort is. So now imagine this. We take a look at the last year of your sales, and we say, hey, you are doing unbelievably well with the J53s that I mentioned earlier, right? J53s are, young urban achievers. Call them that. That's whatever the segment is that we call it, right? They make on average $178,000 a year. Only 22% of them are married. No, or have children, excuse me. and then here's all their psychographic information, right? But now you know when somebody who comes in with who's labeled as or appended as a J53 on the lead as it comes in real time, you can do that, right? We got to offer the J53 these vehicles because most of the time this is what they end up buying. This is just and people think, well, so what's your algorithm? There's no algorithm. It's looking at this is where the value of your first party data comes in play, is we're just going to take a look at the data that's sitting there fallow in your data set, and a system like Qore is going to put its AI brain on it and say, listen, when this guy Sean shows up, he's a J53, they're 5 times more likely to buy this type of car than this. So let's make sure we throw that in the mix. It's nothing more complicated than doing that. It's just that you need a giant brain that can do it all automatically for you on the fly. And that's what something like QoreAI can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me, I look at the same. And then there's also another aspect, taking the website visitors, de-anonymizing them. And then knowing once I've de-anonymized them and I can ID them, you can put things in front of them that feels like Minority Report. Like, hey, look like you gained 5 pounds and you need new jeans, Todd. And I see that world of like crazy personalization, like this is going to be the new driver. And listen, this to me, I just had to look. It goes all the way back to 1993. I read a book called The One-to-One Future by Martha Rogers and Don Pepper. They were direct marketers because there was no real internet, right? And how they used to deliver one-to-one marketing at scale through traditional things. So that framework has existed now for over, what are we talking, 30 years. None of this is real. That piece isn't new. But by being able to put those kind of what I call almost traditional models, break them apart, use the attributes of them now on AI, you create a whole new level of what's possible for personalization. And it's the same understanding of a thing that Pep or Libby did back in the 60s with direct marketing. I have the book, which is super cool because it's so out of print, you can't even find them anymore. And it was called Recency, Frequency, and Monetary Value. And they used to code databases with a 3-digit code. 111, someone who wasn't recently in, not a frequent user of your business, spent the least money. And a 555 would be your recently in, frequent user of your business, spends the most money. And then you have quintiles. You have people all across the gaps, right? You have a 124s and a 441s, and you have all these things that they create quintiles. But it allows you to target and market to them all differently. And to me now, that is like the prehistoric way of what you can now do with AI, and so much faster and in real time. Because think about this, and just think about auto in one category. Let's take oil changes. So in dealerships, they constantly send out low-cost oil change offers to their database, right?
Yep.
But there is a group, a segment in their database that'll pay full price. So you lose that money instantly because the full price guy's like, coupon, I'm going to use it.
Yep.
So to me, it's that concept of like maximize through understanding your audience. It allows you to create the right personalization to activate them into action. And this is where AI is just going to blow the doors off of possibilities. And we're only seeing, our engineers are only seeing the beginning of what we're already doing with like web data. And then the muscle of Equifax data, the acceleration is going to be not only incredibly fast, I think we're going to get to a point where like, that guy only gets this because we already know so much about him. Like, this is how you keep his, what I call loyalty loop moving, while this person's loyalty loop moves completely differently. And now magnify that over a 25, 50, 100, 500,000 customer database in real time. That's the new power, right? Where we couldn't have processed that 2 or 3 years ago. It would have been impossible.
Yeah, it's I mean, personalization is actually getting to be real as opposed to just a word that we use to get dealers' attention about some new thing it's taking on. I wanted to ask you guys about, it is a personal thing in terms of vehicle recommendation. It's a personal thing when there's an availability issue, when people are like, I really want this. And so I'm curious to know, how does access to real-time data inventory from the dealer factor into the vehicle recommendations and opportunity? Obviously, that's a very personalized thing. How does that factor in?
Yeah, look, I think we run mostly stores on like a 15-minute. So accessing dealership every 15 minutes.
Wow.
A lot of it depends on the dealer, right? Some dealers may only be updating their inventory once a day. We don't think that's the best, right? Some are twice a day. I mean, 15 minutes when you have a store or a group that is selling a decent amount of cars, meaning stuff is constantly moving or being added into the mix, the faster you can create that match, the better. So I think that, creating a decent data update cadence, and what you're looking for, you're not really rerunning a whole database. You're only looking for changes in the database, like what VINs were dropped, what VINs were added, right? And there's probably a future, and Brian might know more, where as we dive deeper into the data and you understand what customers buy, and you understand the attributes around that vehicle, you may be able to reapply those attributes to different vehicles. Meaning, this customer always buys leather, sunroof, convenience package, CarPlay, right? Once you're in a VIN level, understanding, and the machine learning will know. And it's just like, well, I can declassify these cars out of inventory instantly beyond affordability because the consumer has these preferences that are hard coded in what we see them purchasing. And that's where we're heading.
Those are all great points, Todd. And just one point of interest I wanted to you made me think of here. We actually have OEMs using the same data Qore is using to actually better target inventory allocation. So they're able to understand the population across the U.S. and who's going to buy what ahead of time as they're coming into market. That's the second piece they're looking at. And they're saying we got to have more of vehicle X over here and more vehicle Y over here. So they're optimizing their inventory mix using this data, which is the same what Todd is actually enabling to at the dealer level.
So it's funny you say that, Brian, because I think right now a lot of the manufacturers have misbuilt things.
Oh, absolutely.
And so every manufacturer listening should probably give you a call.
Yep.
And have your data, because there's definitely a huge amount of product mismatch in the market today, where they built things and wrong configs to the market. But I mean, when you break that down, Brian, now you got me thinking like the value to an OEM to deliver the right cars into a marketplace, to not have to move them or discount and incentivize them to move from that dealer ground is incredibly valuable. So when I had my Chevy store, I only ordered black Tahoes and Suburbans, mostly all LTZs, because I knew I could trade for any other terrible color at the time that was being produced, including that Bermuda blue that I remembered so well. So like I took the complete opposite strategy and said, well, everyone in New York always needs black. So I took the Henry Ford advice at my Chevy store, and that's why I ordered almost all black. And of course, they would have to throw me the occasional beige, white, or that horrible ruby red thing. But I avoided a couple of those other colors. Like, man, I remember a Bermuda blue hit my lot, and I was like, oh, God. I'm going to have to put a huge freaking discount on this. I might as well make it a demo for 6 months and drive this horrible color. It's like, you can't tint windows in New Jersey. So I refuse to do that. So
you guys are making this easy. I was going to ask about some kind of in real life scenarios, but you just shared a couple that I think are massively valuable. And I think we'll probably end up talking about them even on future episodes. Yeah. And before I move on to kind of the last category that I want to pick your brains on, um, I, I can't help but maybe just emphasize one more time that all of this leads up to so much benefit for the dealer, right? There's just so much. It's the expansion of opportunities for them to be more profitable, for them to, better efficiency. There's just so many, like this whole operating system, getting your mind around that. It's expansion of opportunities through all this data that can be leveraged in ways that it hadn't before. But it absolutely is pretty much at the center of the target when utilized correctly, going to make the experiences for consumers better too. That's why I say these win-wins, where we've wanted these things and we've almost like believed whoever the Pied Piper is leading everyone off the cliff. There's been a lot of those types of people trying to take those messages to our dealers and to the industry for, I don't know, at least a decade or 15 years now, that didn't have all of this, and now we have it. And these are just different conversations that I think are really, really powerful for dealers to be paying attention to. So I want to take you into the last kind of section of today's podcast, and that is basically the underutilized potential of data in our industry. You've stated that data is incorrectly valuable, right? Incredibly valuable, but underutilized. Why do you think that is the case? Is it, well, I just want to know, just off the top, why?
I'm going to go one word, and Brian, you jump on this word. I'm going to go siloed.
So, all right.
Siloed.
Let me go backwards one step before we get to siloed, right?
Yeah.
I think what there is, this is already a cliche too, right? But data is the new oil, right? That's one of my previous companies. A CEO would always say that, and I always liked that slogan, right?
Which I think he stole from my presentation. I literally can pull the slide up.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
that
trying to say it out of your presentation.
Probably 15 years ago,
All
that data was new oil. So I'm going to pull it up. So
here's the problem though, okay, that a lot of dealers have gone through, and I went through myself. There was a lot of bad data out there. There are a lot of fly-by-night data providers, and once you burn somebody once, they're not going to touch the stove again. And that's a lot of what we fight right now. But I had a lesson taught to me the hard way, right? So I used to work for this company that was we were behavioral data pioneers. And I was in talking to an OEM VP, and they were one of the OEMs that used our data. And I'm presenting all of this data to him, and it's incredible. And I'm in love with it, right? This is 20 years ago. I'm in love with the data. I'm just like wide-eyed and teary-eyed looking at it. And he finally said to me, he's like, Brian, I love all this data, but now you have to tell me what the F I do with it. That's exactly what he said, his term. And it hit me like a book, like just between the eyes, right? Like I'm in here showing them all this beautiful data, and I'm not telling him what to do with it or how to use it, right? So that's the difference now, which is that you have like smart people like Todd and a bunch of other people have realized I can't just walk in and tell you to use the data, or you have access to this data now. You got to have, this system has to also automate it so that I'm going to get the data for you, and then I'm going to execute against that data. And it's not going to be something that requires you to do anything. I don't want your salespeople going into the system and touching anything. The system has the brains now and processing power to do this without you thinking about it. And if you don't believe me, just go on Amazon.com and see what happens every single day, because that there's not humans there deciding what to show to you. It's a computer. It's Skynet, right?
So. Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, when we looked at it the same, that dealerships, look, they want you to, in a lot of cases, they have limited amount of time. They're always open and willing to try new things to sell more cars.
Sure.
But, it can't change their process. And they kind of want to use the same infrastructure that they have. So I think for us, it was understanding that, okay, when we deal with those constraints, we need the CRM data, we need to get on the website, we need the DMS data, we need to aggregate that, we need to now process all of that. That we need to bubble up the opportunities in a way that could feed their existing things. And that could be their agencies, right? It could be their direct mail company for some of it. It could be their BDC for the really like people that, hey, these people need contact like right now. It could be back to their CRM for a piece. It could be some other service they use. It's crazy. I was just talking to a dealer and I'm like, do you use your CRM to send stuff out? And he goes, well, I go build the email template and design it in some service. Then I bring it back and then I put it into my CRM and then I send it, but I don't send it to everyone. And I was like, what a crazy, I was like, this guy, I was like, that is an entire 2 days of something that if you had MailChimp, it's like 36 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Like hit a couple buttons, pick my lists and I go. So I think like for dealers, yeah, as Brian says, less is better. And they just want the benefits of it, right? And I think dealers are not in the data business, but dealers have to start considering themselves in this business because it is the lifeblood of their business. Though inventory is important, though their facility is important, their ability to collect, organize, and understand their data is what's going to propel them. And what we've talked about today is one sliver of the data. We've talked about sales and marketing data. There is multiple layers of system of intelligence where we talk about, operational data. How do contracts in transit move? How much time do things take? Like there's all the internal data that the organization is creating. Because of technology, organizations throw off so much data, but we're barely getting, most are barely getting their arms around any of it to utilize, understand, and then optimize. And I think the only competitive point of the future is dealers to get more efficient, because everyone has the same cars. You're not going to outsell somebody based on pricing your inventory, right? You may get slightly better salespeople and train them, but it's not going to be so incrementally different than your competitors. Facility's facility. So what are you going to do? And your ability to operate more efficiently than your competition is the true, to me, only place where real money is going to be made. Where if it costs me as I'm a dealer $100 per vehicle retail, and it's costing you $250, $500, $700, and my competitors, I win every single day. Even if I'm $200, $300 less per vehicle, my PVR is less. I still beat you every day.
Mhm.
And I think it's a change in the game. It's a cerebral change of what game are we really playing? And yes, we sell cars, but the cars are an output. Like for Amazon, do you think Amazon cares about selling books? Amazon cares about understanding you and what you will buy and when. And they've perfected that. Hence making Jeff Bezos literally the first or second richest guy on the planet, because he put his effort in the customer experience by understanding you. And all the products, they're just bonus. He doesn't care.
You know that Amazon for 2023, they attributed $16 billion of their revenue directly to the personalization they can do as a result of data. $16 billion for one company.
Yes. So think about this. Zero for today, dealers are zero.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
So it's
amazing.
Think about that. It's all uphill. It's like perfect. Now is the time for dealers to get in, build a system. And the one other thing I want to leave with is dealers treat data. The nicest way that I would put this is they're not thinking through it all the way. When you hire a vendor and I give them your data, and then the data, they go off, clean it, do stuff with it, and then it stops working after time for whatever reason. So you fire them, and then you hire a new one, and now you re-give the same old data to the new one. He cleans it. Dealers need to have control of that data center. And that was a big thing with Qore we wanted to deliver was, look, we're going to organize your data. It's going to live, and now you can connect it to whatever vendors you want. We don't care. But we also want to see what went to them and where, because that's going to be a big thing with compliance, where what data was sent to that vendor, they got hacked. Okay, I have to understand my data schema of responsibility. Dealers have no idea of that across the board. Many stores are sending data to providers who they're not even contracted with any longer. I see that all the time. But dealers need to have a nucleus of data that is never going to change. And it will become through time by far the most valuable asset of their organization. And that is not going to happen in a CRM. It's not going to happen in a DMS.
Man, this is a great spot to reel you guys in a little bit. It's really good
I mean, reel
episode.
me in. I know.
But really good stuff. I want to give you guys both maybe at the end of this, just got a couple things to ask. One, I love both of your takes on what you think the vision in terms of future of data utilization is going to be. We've kind of covered a lot of that, but if you guys want to kind of give your concise thought, if you put on your what's happening next year, 5 years, you don't have to go to 10 years, but what's the future?
We're so knee deep in the future right now that it's hard to say what's happening. Like what's happening, I think we talked earlier. You mentioned don't like the word disruption, which I agree with. Right, the highway is littered with the bodies of previous disruptors. Right, but what I think we are in is a attitude adjustment, is what I would say. And the attitude adjustment is that data is not something. Data, process, and customer experience are not something that I can be on cruise control anymore. And listen, I mean, look at the mega groups, right? If you don't get good at doing what they're doing, they're coming for you, right? They're going to put your smaller stores and your smaller groups out of business if you don't get as. And here's what's really cool is that the product, the tools that Todd has created can be scaled for a mega group, or it can be scaled for an individual store. That you can have the exact same capability as those guys. It's kind of that's what democratization of capability in data is what's happening, is where I think this is going. More are going to have access and see the value in using this type of data in their sales processes.
Yeah, listen, I live in probably 2-week increments. I'm like a fly, my cycles are really fast because I live with our AI engineers, and they're like, just when I think I have something, they're like, hey, look at this. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, what's that? Oh, they're called, no, we had this, that architecture is gone. And I was like, what do you mean it's gone? They're like, oh, no, this has been released. This has changed this. So I think we're living in an insanely fluid time. And that means infrastructure that's being built today has to have that capability to be incredibly flexible. And the challenges in our industry, almost all our industry is built on archaic architectural structure, fixed database fields, not like, so we have to rethink some things to be able to kind of start turning on these new business opportunities. And it's just looking at things from, like, to me, that first principles view versus, you're not going to get it out of a CRM today. I mean, they would have to gut it and rebuild it, and nobody's willing to do that because it's just too expensive, right? And it's weird to say that because the new companies are going to be the ones that grow and ultimately then become the old companies. And I think you're just going to see that cycle move faster today, where it took, let's say in auto, it takes probably 15 years to go from like my startup, my previous startup, my chat company, to being like a good size in thousands and thousands of stores, right? And now you can do it in 3 years, right? And soon you're going to do it in a year, like, because infrastructure enables that. And we're just dealing with a new world of AI infrastructure right now, 27% of our code is written by AI inside Qore. It's writing itself at a small level, but it is taking care of itself too, which is mind-blowingly crazy to think like Skynet is really turned on. and what happens, I don't know. But it's very interesting to watch it unfold. And I mean, listen, again, I love this stuff. I'm super excited, not only for data, but I think the passion is always just help dealers do what they're already trying to do. Sell more cars, operate more efficiently, and think about the future from a perspective and a roadmap that they can get behind and want to execute on each and every day. So
I got one last question for both of you. So you've got a dealer standing in front of you. They've listened to all of this conversation, and you get to give them your advice. They're considering this more data-driven approach. What advice do you give that dealer?
Go easy.
Yeah. What do you got? You have an answer?
No. My answer to the dealer is don't overcomplicate it. This is not the stuff we're talking about here. Everybody wants to come in and tell you they got a black box. They don't, right? When you ask somebody how does it work, and they say, "Well, we've got an algorithm," run, because if they can't explain what they're doing, you're not going to understand what they're doing, right? So, what I'm trying to say is understand two things, right? You're going to have people talk to you about AI. What's AI, right? AI, again, not a black box. AI is simply, it's something that has massive amounts of computing power that can look at all the different variables that you could too. But the problem for you is that AI can do it in about a second, and it'll take you about 45 years to come up with the same number of variables that AI could. So that's the first thing. So it can help you with decisioning. But the second thing is the data itself isn't hugely complicated. What we're talking about with Todd here is somebody walks into your dealership, we can tell you what they can afford. It's that simple. Would that help you sell cars? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Hurry up and sign up for CoreAI because they're going to help you do that.
Yeah,
That's
listen,
solid.
as Brian says, like AI just gives you the power to have tables of billions of lines and instantly see patterns and correlations that humans just can't recognize. And it does it at a speed that is unbelievably fast. And because retail lives in a faster cycle, you need that. And I think for dealers, as Brian says, like forget all AI, forget all of this. If you look at the 20, 30, 50,000 people you sold cars to, if I could tell you which ones are back in market today, is that valuable to you? If I could tell you the ones that are back in market today and what they can afford and most likely what they will buy, is that valuable to you? If I could look at your inbound leads and tell you which ones are real buyers, again, what most likely they will buy within reason and what they can afford, will you be able to close more leads because of that? I can't answer those questions. You as a dealer answers those questions, right? And if you can answer them in a way that you go, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world, then forget the tech. Like to me, it's business. It's
Great point.
Always think process first and then the tech that supports your process. Do not go finding tech and adapt your processes to the tech. You will fail. Because to me, your processes are always the most important. Because and a good example, when I first consulted, did a ton around CRM back, I know this will date me, 2000-ish. Dealers always ask, they're like, well, who has the best follow-up program, Todd? Just put that follow-up program in my CRM. And I'd be like, that's the fastest way to fail. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I was like, that's their business. Your business is different. What you should do is don't do a lot, do very little, and does it work or not? Then correct, add a little more, take a little off this, put a little bit more farther out, put more close. Like you have to build your own. And that's what people don't want to do in our business. They want the, genie lamp comes out, give me my wish, selling 300 cars a month, boom, I'm done. Yeah. But the reality is the smart dealer takes the road that it's built off their process. They're now leveraging tech to accelerate their processes. they're the ones who are going to win this every single day.
Todd, Brian, absolute amazing episode. Great insights. Excellent advice to end it. I just want to thank you guys for a fantastic episode. To the audience, I think it's self-evident, but you may be one of those dealers or somebody listening. And by the way, thanks for spending some of your time with us. But you might have misconceptions or fears about moving in this much more data-driven direction. And I just want to say that's okay. Technology has been moving so fast for all of our lifetimes that it's almost impossible for us to keep up with as consumers, let alone fitting it into how you operate your dealership. So it's okay, but you need to meet people and know people that can actually tell you the truth about these things and how to put it all together. And I can't think of a couple of guys that know this better than Todd and Brian. So make sure you connect with those guys. Jump on LinkedIn and follow Todd and Brian so you get more insightful information. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, hey, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new episodes. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you again soon right here on the Qore Conversations podcast.